December 17, 1944. Johann Paper's 1st SS Panzer Division rolled through the Ardennes toward American positions in Belgium. His tanks carried veterans who'd fought across Normandy. Men who should have been captured or killed 4 months earlier. Men who'd escaped through a 15-mile gap that stayed open for 8 days because one American general chose politics over victory. The gap was called Falaise. The decision to leave it open would cost 19,000 American lives by Christmas. Every decision has consequences. If you want to follow how this one cascaded from August to December, hit subscribe. But to understand why 50,000 German soldiers escaped when they could have been trapped, we need to go back to August 13, 1944. August 13th. General George Patton stood in his 3rd Army headquarters studying maps. His forces had just captured Argentan, 15 miles south of Falaise. Over 100,000 German soldiers trapped in a pocket with backs against the Allied noose. Patton's tanks could reach Falaise in hours and seal the trap. Then the phone rang. General Omar Bradley. Stop where you are. Do not advance beyond Argentan. Patton couldn't believe it. Bradley was ordering him to halt with victory within reach. The German 7th Army was broken, retreating in chaos. One more push would destroy them. Let me go to Falaise and we'll drive the British into the sea for another Dunkirk, Patton said. Bradley's order was final. 3rd Army would halt at Argentan and wait. Wait for British and Canadian forces to close the gap from north. Wait while Germans poured through the opening. 15 miles. That's all. 15 miles that would remain open for 8 more days. The Falaise Pocket formed from German stubbornness and Allied breakthrough. 6 weeks after D-Day, forces stuck in Normandy hedgerows. Then Operation Cobra smashed through July 25th. Bradley's 1st Army punched a hole. Patton's 3rd Army poured through, racing east and south. Hitler made the worst call possible. Instead of withdrawing to the Seine, he ordered counterattack. August 7th. 4 panzer divisions attacked west toward Mordain. Failed within 48 hours. The failed offensive left Germans in a salient with Allies on 3 sides. British and Canadians pressed from north toward Falaise. Americans wheeled from south and east. By August 12th, over 100,000 German troops trapped between Falaise and Argentan. Only escape: narrow gap east toward the Seine. Field Marshal von Kluge knew the situation was desperate. Armies needed to escape immediately or face complete destruction. But Hitler ordered, hold positions, keep fighting. Every hour the pocket stayed open, more Germans escaped. Every day allowed them to regroup. The opportunity to destroy German forces in France was slipping away. Patton's 3rd Army had covered 200 miles in 2 weeks since August 1st. Liberated Le Mans, Alsace, Argentan. Positioned perfectly to close the Falaise Pocket from south. Germans in chaos. Allied fighter bombers destroyed vehicles on every road. Artillery hammered positions constantly. Units mixed together, communication breaking down. Route waiting to be completed. Major General Wade Hayslip's 15 Corps took Argentan August 13th with minimal resistance. Reconnaissance reported road to Falaise lightly defended. 2nd French Armored and 5th Armored ready to advance immediately. Patton saw it clearly. If 15 Corps pushed north while Montgomery's forces pushed south, they'd link up near Falaise and trap everyone. Classic encirclement. Distance negligible. Argentan to Falaise, 15 miles. Patton's armor could cover that in hours. Even with resistance, a day or 2 maximum. But there was a problem. The boundary between Bradley's 12th Army Group and Montgomery's 21st Army Group ran through this area. Allied planners drew the line to prevent friendly fire. Patton didn't care about boundaries. He cared about destroying the German army while vulnerable. His staff, they had unparalleled opportunity to win the war here, and they were letting it slip because of coordination problems. Patton called Bradley, requested permission to advance beyond Argentan toward Falaise, willing to accept risk of encountering Montgomery's forces if it meant closing the pocket. Omar Bradley faced the most consequential decision of his command. Let Patton advance and risk friendly fire, or halt and wait for Montgomery to close from north. Bradley was fundamentally cautious. Career staff officer before field command in 1943. Valued planning and coordination over aggressive improvisation. Patton's request went against every instinct. Legitimate tactical concerns existed. American and British forces had different radio frequencies, recognition signals, converging in confusing circumstances, real risk of American tanks firing on Canadians or vice versa. But the larger concern was political. Montgomery was Bradley's equal, not subordinate. Boundary agreement negotiated between Eisenhower, Montgomery, Bradley. Changing it required Montgomery's consent. Bradley had endured months of friction with Montgomery over command and resources. Montgomery resented American dominance, complained about Eisenhower's strategy. The relationship was tense, fragile. If Americans crossed into Montgomery's sector without permission, deliberate insult. Montgomery would protest to Churchill. Churchill to Roosevelt. Political consequences could damage the alliance. Bradley decided. Patton would halt at Argentan and hold. Third Army wouldn't cross the boundary. Montgomery's forces would be given time to close from north. Politically safe. Avoided friendly fire. Respected command structure. Kept Montgomery's pride intact. But left the escape route open. Patton's response was immediate, furious. Let me go to Falaise and we'll drive the British into the sea for another Dunkirk. Classic Patton, aggressive, tactless, revealing contempt for Montgomery's ability. Bradley ignored it. Repeated the order. Hold at Argentan. Do not advance. Patton argued. 15 Corps positioned perfectly. Resistance minimal. Road open. Every hour of delay let more escape. Opportunity would never come again. Bradley's answer. Political, not tactical. Crossing boundary without Montgomery's permission creates problems. Better to wait than risk an incident. Patton hung up. Lost the argument. Called corps commanders and issued halt with barely contained rage. Third Army stops at Argentan and waits. Thousands of American tanks sat idling. Crews climbed out onto hulls. Could hear artillery in distance. See smoke from German positions ahead. Road to Falaise open. But they weren't moving. Officers explained coordination required patience. Tankers looked north toward the gap and wondered why they were stopping when the enemy was running. Patton paced headquarters. The gap mocked them. 15 miles. That's all. He told his staff. Most terrible mistake of the war. Letting the German army escape because they were afraid of upsetting Montgomery's feelings. Diary that night. The halt was terrible mistake. 15 Corps could easily close the gap. Montgomery wouldn't do it in time. Patton's prediction would prove accurate. His protest had no effect. While Patton sat at Argentan, Montgomery's 21st Army Group advanced south toward Falaise. 1st Canadian Army under Lieutenant General Harry Crerar with British I Corps attached. Experienced formations since D-Day. But slow. Germans defending northern shoulder fought desperately to keep escape open. SS panzer divisions conducted fighting withdrawals. Terrain favored defense. Bocage like the hedgerows from June-July. Every field had earthen banks, hedges, natural fortifications. German anti-tank guns everywhere. Montgomery's caution evident in tempo. Canadians advanced methodically with heavy artillery before each assault. Casualties minimized. Progress in hundreds of meters daily. August 16th, 3 days after Patton halted, Canadians still hadn't reached Falaise. Town fell August 17th. But Pocket not sealed. Gap east toward Chambois stayed open. Quick thing. Tired of AI channels? Membership has real footage and full analysis. Link below. Back to what was happening in that gap. Coordination was difficult. British, Canadian, American, Polish forces converging. Different nationalities, different command structures, confusing terrain. Montgomery claimed deliberate pace necessary to avoid casualties, maintain control. Trying to close too quickly would create chaos. But slow advance gave Germans precious time to escape. August 13th to 21st, Falaise Gap remained partially open. 8 days. Tens of thousands escaped. Gap shifted as Allies advanced. 15-mile opening between Argentan and Falaise became narrower corridor between Chambois and St. Lambert. Never completely closed until August 21st. Germans poured through in desperation. Abandoned heavy equipment. Fled on foot. Officers organized rearguard actions while main body escaped. Some units disciplined. Others chaos. Allied air power devastated columns. Fighter bombers attacked everything moving. Destroyed vehicles created massive jams. Dead horses rotting in August heat. Burning equipment. Black smoke filling air. Pilots reported smelling carnage from thousands of feet up. Death mixed with burning rubber, fuel. Drivers steered around wreckage. Roads completely blocked. Some ran over bodies because no other way forward. Carnage so intense Germans abandoned good vehicles just to escape on foot. Sitting in stalled column meant waiting for next strafing run. Movement meant death from above. Staying still meant destruction. But they kept coming. Field Marshal Walter Model, replacing von Kluge August 17th, ordered every unit to fight east toward Seine. Alternative: surrender or annihilation. Most chose to run through the corridor of death. Polish forces reached Chambois August 19th. Americans linked at St. Lambert August 19th. Gap finally closing. But not completely sealed until August 21st when organized German resistance ended. Too late. Significant portion had escaped. The exact number of German soldiers who escaped the Falaise Pocket has been debated by historians for 80 years. Fog of war makes precise counts impossible. Allied forces captured approximately 50,000 German prisoners inside the pocket. They counted roughly 10,000 German dead. Destroyed vehicles numbered in thousands. Material losses were staggering. But German records suggest between 20,000 and 50,000 soldiers escaped the encirclement. These weren't just random soldiers. They were experienced combat veterans from elite formations. Elements of 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, got out. Survivors from 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandard Adolf Hitler, escaped. Parts of 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend made it through. These were the best trained, most fanatical units in the German army. Regular Wehrmacht divisions also escaped in significant numbers. The 116th Panzer Division, 2nd Panzer Division, and Panzerlehr all had survivors who reached the Seine and continued retreating east toward Germany. These weren't just survivors. They were the core of experienced soldiers who could rebuild shattered divisions. Officers who knew how to train replacements. NCOs who understood combined arms tactics. Veterans who wouldn't panic under fire. Field Marshal Model used these survivors to form new defensive lines along the Siegfried Line and German border. The soldiers who escaped Falaise became the nucleus of divisions that would fight the Battle of the Bulge 4 months later. Every decision shapes the future. Hit subscribe to see how this one kept unfolding. Because those SS divisions that escaped, they were about to kill thousands of Americans in the Ardennes. 1st SS Panzer Division would spearhead the Ardennes offensive. 12th SS Panzer Division would fight in the northern sector. 2nd SS Panzer Division would participate in southern attacks. 116th Panzer Division would be committed to exploitation operations. All of them had veterans who'd escaped through the Falaise Gap. All of them would kill Americans in December. December 16th, 1944. Germans launched last major Western Front offensive through Ardennes. Over 200,000 troops hit weakly defended American positions. Complete surprise. Spearheaded by SS Panzer divisions that escaped Falaise 4 months earlier. 1st SS led northern advance. 12th SS supported. Rebuilt with new tanks, fresh troops. But core was Normandy veterans. Officers who learned fighting since D-Day. NCOs who survived months of combat. Tank commanders who knew Allied tactics. American forces suffered over 19,000 killed. Total casualties exceeded 80,000. Bloodiest U.S. Army battle in European theater. Many died fighting Germans who should have been captured at Falaise. SS officers Bulge tactics learned in Normandy. Panzer crews who destroyed Shermans escaped through Gap in August. Direct connection. Patton recognized it. Third Army called north from Lorraine to relieve 101st Airborne at Bastogne. Fighting through German resistance, his diary noted many opposing units had escaped Falaise. He'd told them to close that gap in August. Now paying in American blood. 2nd SS Panzer Division fought Falaise, escaped, opposed Patton trying to relieve Bastogne. Brutal fighting. Heavy casualties both sides. Bradley later admitted the decision to halt Patton at Argentan was probably a mistake. In his memoirs, he wrote that closing the gap earlier might have shortened the war and saved lives. But he never acknowledged how many lives. Bradley defended his halt order publicly by citing friendly fire risks. American and British forces converging on same objective with different radio frequencies could shoot each other by mistake. The explanation sounded reasonable. But the friendly fire excuse didn't hold up under scrutiny. Soviet forces on the Eastern Front regularly closed encirclements from multiple directions without excessive friendly fire incidents. Proper coordination and radio discipline could manage the risk. August 19th proved the point. When American and Polish forces finally linked up at Chambois, there were no friendly fire disasters. Units from different armies coordinated successfully despite confusion of combat. Bradley knew the friendly fire excuse was thin. In his 1951 memoir, A Soldier's Story, he acknowledged the halt order was probably wrong. He admitted the gap should have been closed sooner. He stopped short of saying how many American lives the delay cost. What Bradley never admitted in print was that the decision was fundamentally about command relationships, not tactical risks. He'd chosen to avoid confrontation with Montgomery over boundary violations. He'd prioritized alliance harmony over the opportunity to destroy the German army in France. Patton understood this immediately. His supporters understood it. Military historians would debate it for decades. But the soldiers who died at the Bulge never got to weigh in on whether protecting Montgomery's pride was worth their lives. German forces that escaped Falaise retreated to the Seine River, then back to Siegfried Line along German border. They formed corps of German defense that held Allied forces through fall and winter of 1944. The fighting in September and October 1944 was some of the bloodiest of the war. American forces attacked Siegfried Line at Aachen and in Hürtgen Forest. Casualties were staggering for minimal gains. German defenders fought with skill and determination. Many of those defenders were veterans of Normandy who had escaped through the Falaise Gap. They knew Allied tactics. They'd been fighting British and American forces since June. They were experienced, battle-hardened soldiers who wouldn't break easily. If the Falaise Pocket had been closed completely in mid-August, those veterans would have been removed from German order of battle. The Siegfried Line would have been defended by hastily organized replacement units without combat experience. The Allied advance might have reached the Rhine in 1944 instead of 1945. But that's speculation. What actually happened is that Allied forces ground slowly through German defenses at enormous cost. The war in Europe continued for 9 more months. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers died on both sides in battles that might have been avoided. Patton believed until his death that the Falaise Gap failure extended the war by 6 months. He argued that closing the pocket in August would have allowed Allied forces to reach Germany before German defenses could be organized. Whether he was right is unknowable. But the decision to halt at Argentan had consequences that rippled through the fall and winter campaigns. The Germans who escaped became the soldiers who defended every river, every town, every defensive position on the way to Berlin. Historians have debated the Falaise Gap decision for 8 decades. Arguments fall into predictable patterns based on whether you prioritize military efficiency or alliance politics. Those who defend Bradley's decision emphasize the genuine risk of friendly fire between converging Allied forces. Radio communication between American and British units was problematic. Recognition signals weren't standardized. Confusion of combat in confined terrain could easily have led to tragic mistakes. They also point out that Montgomery's forces were already advancing toward Falaise from north. Waiting a few days for proper coordination seemed reasonable at the time. The failure wasn't Bradley's halt order, but Montgomery's slow advance once British and Canadians took responsibility for closing the gap. Those who criticize the decision argue that Patton's forces were positioned perfectly and the opportunity was too valuable to pass up. Risk of friendly fire could have been managed with proper communication. The real issue was Bradley's unwillingness to challenge Montgomery's authority over boundary agreement. They note that similar encirclements on Eastern Front regularly involved Soviet forces closing pockets from multiple directions without excessive friendly fire incidents. Technical challenges were manageable if commanders prioritized effectiveness over political sensitivities. German commanders interviewed after the war were unanimous. The failure to close the Falaise Gap was the biggest tactical mistake the Allies made in the Normandy campaign. Field Marshal von Rundstedt called it inexplicable. Model said the escape saved the German army in the West from complete destruction. The debate continues because both sides have valid points. Bradley's caution was understandable. Patton's frustration was justified. The result was a compromise that satisfied neither military logic nor political necessity. For the full story with archival footage we couldn't show here, membership link is below. Real research, no AI. Thanks for watching. The Falaise Gap failure extended the war through fall and winter of 1944. Every week of additional combat meant more American casualties in battles that might have been avoided. In August 1944, there'd been talk of ending the war before Christmas. If the Falaise Pocket had been sealed completely, if the German army in France had been destroyed instead of allowed to escape, Allied forces might have reached the Rhine by October. The Siegfried Line might have fallen before winter. Instead, American soldiers who should have been home for Christmas 1944 were freezing in foxholes in the Ardennes, fighting the same German veterans they'd let escape 4 months earlier. Instead of dinner with families, they were dying in snow. September through December saw some of the bloodiest fighting of the entire European campaign. Hurtgen Forest Battle cost 33,000 American casualties. Fighting through dense woods for strategically questionable objectives. Siegfried Line assaults cost tens of thousands more attacking fortified positions. These autumn battles are less famous than the Bulge, but they were fought against German forces that included veterans who'd escaped Falaise, the experienced NCOs who trained replacement troops, the officers who organized defensive positions, the combat veterans who wouldn't panic under artillery fire. Every American killed in these battles had a family. Every telegram from War Department destroyed lives back home. Mothers who lost sons. Wives who lost husbands. Children who lost fathers. The aggregate effect of extending the war, even by weeks, was measured in thousands of graves at military cemeteries across Europe. Patton understood this in personal terms. He commanded soldiers who fought through fall and winter. He saw casualty reports from every division under his command. He knew that decisions made in August were being paid for in blood in November and December. Bradley carried weight of his decision for the rest of his life. In his memoirs, he acknowledged the gap should have been closed sooner. He admitted the halt order was probably wrong, but he never quantified how many lives it cost. That calculation is impossible to make with precision. The numbers include not just the Bulge, but the grinding autumn battles that preceded it. The total runs into tens of thousands when you count all casualties from September through December fighting German forces that should have been captured or killed at Falaise. And every one of those deaths had a name. December 1944. Patton stood in snow at Bastogne watching his soldiers fight Germans who should have been captured 4 months earlier. This was the moment he'd predicted in August. The validation he didn't want. His staff officers watched him study tactical maps showing German formations. 1st SS Panzer Division attacking from north. 12th SS Panzer Division in support. 2nd SS Panzer Division trying to cut the road to Bastogne. All of them rebuilt around the veterans who'd escaped Falaise. Patton didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't need to. Everyone in his headquarters knew what he was thinking. The halt order at Argentan had led directly to this moment. The decision to prioritize alliance politics over military effectiveness was being paid for in American blood in the Ardennes snow. He wrote in his diary that he'd warned them they should have closed that gap in August. Now they were paying for it. But there was no satisfaction in being right. Just anger at the waste. Frustration at soldiers who died fighting an enemy that should never have escaped. The lesson had been taught repeatedly throughout the war. In coalition warfare, political considerations override military logic. The best battlefield commander doesn't always get to make the decisions that matter most. And soldiers pay the price for compromises made by coalition partners and politicians. He would carry that bitterness for the rest of his life. The knowledge that he'd seen the opportunity clearly. That he'd made his case as forcefully as he could. That Bradley had said no. And that thousands of Americans had died because of that decision. Being right 4 months too late didn't change the fact that he'd been right. One question remains. If Patton had been given permission to advance from Argentan to Falaise on August 13th, could he have closed the gap before Germans escaped? The tactical answer is probably yes. 15 miles of lightly defended terrain against experienced armored divisions advancing at speed. The gap could have been closed within 24 to 48 hours. Whether that would have trapped all 100,000 Germans in the pocket is less certain. Some would have escaped before link-up. Some would have fought through the encirclement. But the vast majority, and their heavy equipment, would have been forced to surrender. The strategic consequences would have been significant. Without veteran survivors to rebuild divisions, German defenses along Siegfried Line would have been weaker. The Battle of the Bulge might not have been possible without experienced SS Panzer divisions to spearhead it. But we'll never know. Bradley made his choice. Patton obeyed his orders. The gap stayed open. The Germans escaped. And thousands of Allied soldiers paid the price in battles that followed.